Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tackling a case that, well, it's hard to overstate its impact. It's dominated headlines, police work, public discussion for, almost 2 decades now?
It really has. We're diving into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Happened back in Praia de Luz, Portugal, May 3rd, 2007.
And it became, as some sources put it, the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history. Just an unbelievable amount of coverage.
Absolutely immense. And it's a sprawling investigation. It crosses Portuguese, British, German lines. The sheer volume of stuff out there, it's often contradictory. Frankly, it can feel overwhelming.
Right. So our mission for you, the listener, is to try to cut through some of that noise, the sensational headlines. We want to give you a clear chronological look, but also thematic.
Exactly. Focus on the documented facts, what the police actually did, the major shifts in the investigation, and maybe touch on why. 17 years on, we still don't have a definitive answer.
Yeah.
It's elusive.
Okay, let's get into it. The timeline. We start in Praia de Luz, Portugal, May 3rd, 2007. Maybe set the scene for us first. Madeleine McCann herself.
Right. Madeleine was nearly 4 years old, born in Leicester, and she had these two very distinct features, which became, vital for appeals.
Okay.
There was a small brown spot, quite noticeable, on her left leg, and maybe more unusually, this dark strip, it's called a coloboma technically, on the iris of her right eye. Gave her a very unique look.
Got it. And her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann.
Both doctors, physicians, practicing Roman Catholics. They were staying in apartment 5A at the Ocean Club Resort. It's a ground floor place, pretty popular holiday spot in the Algarve.
Sometimes called Little Britain, I read. Lots of British tourists.
That's right, high volume of Brits there. And they weren't alone. They were with this big group of friends, 7 adults total, plus their kids, 8 children altogether.
Became known as the Tapas 7.
The Tapas 7, exactly. And the key thing, geographically, is the apartment, 5A. Its relation to the restaurant where they ate.
Yeah.
It was about 55 meters away, straight line.
But walking distance.
Walking distance was more like 82 meters. So close enough you could check, but definitely far enough that you had to keep checking regularly. It wasn't right next door.
Okay, let's get into the timeline of that specific day, May 3rd. And interestingly, it doesn't start with the evening, does it? There was something odd at breakfast.
Yeah, this is a detail that Kate McCann recalled later, and it's quite chilling, really. Madeleine apparently asked her, "Why didn't you come when my brother and I cried last night?"
Wow. So what does that suggest?
Well, it immediately throws things into question, doesn't it? Was there some disturbance the night before? An earlier intrusion attempt, maybe? Or just bad dreams? We don't know. But it adds this layer of uncertainty right from the start.
And there was something else that morning.
Her mother also noticed this large brown stain on Madeleine's pajama top. Again, what caused it? Was she restless? Did something happen? It muddies the waters about what might have occurred even before that final evening.
Right. So fast forward to the evening. The children, Madeleine, in those, now iconic pink and white Eeyore pajamas.
Marks and Spencer's, short-sleeved.
Right. They were put to bed around 7:00 p.m. And the parents and their friends, the Tapas 7, they started dinner at this open-air tapas restaurant around 8:30 p.m.
And here's a detail the McCanns later flagged as a potential security issue. Apparently, resort staff had left a note, quite publicly, in the swimming pool reception area.
What did it say?
It was about the block booking for the Tapas 7's table, but it specifically mentioned that their children were asleep in the nearby apartments. Kate McCann later worried quite publicly that maybe the abductor saw that note.
Like an advertisement saying unsupervised children here.
Exactly. That it confirmed the opportunity. Whether that's true or not, it's something that clearly weighed on them.
So the plan was to check on the kids regularly, every half hour or so.
Yeah, roughly every 30 to 40 minutes. Jerry McCann did the first check. That was at 9:05 p.m.
And what did he find?
Kids were sound asleep, all seemed fine. But he did notice something slightly odd. The children's bedroom door. He recalled leaving it just slightly ajar, but he found it almost wide open.
Significant.
Well, he closed it further and went back to the restaurant. Could be nothing, could be a draft, or it could be the first sign something wasn't right. Hard to say in retrospect.
Okay, so about 10 minutes later, around 9:15 p.m., we get the first big potential sighting. The Tanner sighting.
Right. Jane Tanner, one of the Tapas 7 friends, she left the restaurant to check on her own kids. And as she was walking, she saw a man. And he was carrying a young child.
And the details here were seized upon immediately, weren't they?
Hugely. The child was described as wearing light-colored pink pajamas, very similar to Madeleine's, and the man was seen walking away from the direction of apartment 5A towards the home of Robert Murat.
Who we'll get to later, the first suspect.
Exactly. So the timing, the location, the pajamas, it all seemed to fit.
What was the description of the man?
Quite specific initially. White, dark hair, about 5'7". Appeared Southern European or Mediterranean, maybe 35 to 40 years old. If this was the abductor, it meant Madeleine was taken much earlier than they first thought. Around 9:15 p.m.
And then this is a huge but. Years later, the big UK investigation, Operation Grange, they completely reassessed this, didn't they?
They did. And it's fascinating and frankly a bit tragic for the investigation. It took years, immense resources. Operation Grange eventually tracked down the man Jane Tanner saw. He was just a British tourist, completely uninvolved. He was collecting his own daughter from the resort's night crash. She was wearing similar pajamas. Operation Grange concluded it was almost certain this sighting, the Tanner sighting, was completely unrelated.
So massive red herring that shaped the early investigation for years.
Absolutely. Redirected focus, wasted time, potentially allowed the real trail to go cold. It meant they were looking at the wrong time, maybe the wrong description, for a long, long time.
Okay, so if the Tanner sighting is out, that puts the focus squarely back on 10:00 p.m., Kate McCann's check.
Exactly. She goes to check at 10 p.m. She enters through the patio doors at the back, which were unlocked.
And what does she find inside? What was the state of the room? Those physical details seem crucial.
They really are. They suggest something violent or hurried happened. First, she noticed the children's bedroom door was wide open again, much wider than Jerry had left it.
Okay.
And when she went to push it closed, a strong draft slammed it shut. That draft was the immediate red flag.
Because it meant
something was open that shouldn't be, and she saw it immediately. The bedroom window was open, and crucially, the exterior metal shutter outside the window was also open, raised up.
Right. Point of entry or exit?
Almost certainly. And Madeleine was gone. Her younger twin siblings were still asleep in their cots. Madeleine's cuddle cat toy and her blanket were still on the bed, undisturbed.
So she runs back to the restaurant.
Yeah, immediately panicked. Ran back screaming, "Madeleine's gone, someone's taken her." The holiday nightmare instantly became real.
And right around this exact time, 10:00 p.m., maybe 500 yards away, there's another sighting. The Smith sighting, now considered much more significant.
Far more significant, yes. An Irish family on holiday, Martin and Mary Smith, they saw a man walking down the street at roughly 10:00 p.m., the very moment Kate is discovering Madeleine missing.
And he was carrying
a young child. Blonde hair, barefoot, wearing light-colored pajamas. The timing, the description of the child, it lines up almost perfectly with Madeleine and the moment of discovery.
What about the man himself? Was the description different from the Tanner sighting man?
Completely different. This man was described as being in his mid-30s, maybe 5'7" to 5'9", slim to normal build, short brown hair. He was wearing cream or beige trousers, distinctly different from the dark-haired, Mediterranean-looking man Tanner saw.
And anything else about his demeanor?
Yes. This became quite key later. Martin Smith noted the man looked uncomfortable, awkward carrying the child, almost like he was trying to hide her face or just seemed out of place, unnatural.
So why is the sighting now seen as the crucial one?
Well, two main reasons. First, the timing. It aligns perfectly with Kate's discovery, suggesting the abduction happened just moments before she entered the room. Second, that description of the man looking awkward, potentially trying to conceal the child, it fits the profile of someone who has just committed a crime and is trying to get away unnoticed.
And Operation Grange really latched onto this one later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They came to view the Smith sighting as the most probable sighting of the actual abductor and the likely time the abduction occurred. It became the central pillar of their renewed investigation.
Okay, so if the Smith sighting is right, the abductor is on foot nearby right around 10:00 p.m. This leads us straight into what everyone agrees were just catastrophic failures in those first crucial hours, the golden hours, they call them.
They really were catastrophic. The police response was incredibly slow. The McCanns called the police around 10:30 p.m. The GNR, that's the local gendarmerie, the first responders, they didn't arrive until 11:10 p.m.
Nearly an hour later.
Yeah. And then the PJ, the Policia Judiciaria, the actual criminal investigators who should lead this kind of thing, they didn't arrive until just after 1 a.m.
Wow. So you're looking at 3, almost 4 hours gone before the lead investigators are even on the scene.
Critical time just evaporated. And these delays had knock-on effects, major blunders, roadblocks, for instance, standard procedure to try and trap someone in the area.
When were they set up?
10 a.m. the next morning, nearly 12 hours after she disappeared.
12 hours? years? That's
It's
unbelievable.
a massive systemic failure. And it wasn't just roadblocks. Border police, marine police, they weren't given Madeleine's description or the alert for hours.
Yeah.
Spain is right there, ports nearby, plenty of time to get away.
Any other immediate misses?
They didn't request motorway CCTV footage. Standard practice now could have caught a car leaving the area, just wasn't done in time.
So the logistical response was slow and incomplete. What about the crime scene itself, apartment 5A?
Oh, the crime scene handling was, well, the sources consistently describe it as a disaster, massively
Okay.
contaminated. Estimates are around 20 people, friends, resort staff. The initial GNR officers walked through apartment 5A before the PJ finally secured it.
20 people trampling potential evidence.
Exactly. And it gets worse. There's a documented instance of a GNR officer dusting the bedroom window shutter, the likely point of entry-exit, for fingerprints, without wearing gloves.
No gloves, seriously?
Seriously, basic forensic protocol completely ignored. Any potential prints on that shutter were compromised right there. It's just baffling.
And the contamination didn't end that night, did it?
No. The sources say the apartment was basically left unsecured for about a month.
Yeah.
Then, unbelievably, it was cleaned and actually let out to other tourists.
Let out to tourists.
Yes, before eventually being sealed off again much later for more detailed forensic tests. But by then, who knows what evidence was lost or introduced. It fundamentally handicapped the investigation from the very beginning.
You can see why the British police, when they got involved, were probably tearing their hair out.
Oh, absolutely. Leicestershire police were coordinating the UK side, set up a high-level gold group, but they immediately ran into friction with the Portuguese PJ.
Why the friction?
Sources suggest a mix of things. Partly jurisdictional pride, maybe some resentment from the PJ feeling like the British were coming in acting superior, like a colonial power, as one source put it, and also just different systems. The Portuguese judicial process was slower, needing magistrate approval for things the UK police could do more quickly. This just added to the frustration in the sense that vital time was slipping away.
While all this is happening, or rather not happening effectively on the police side, the McCanns themselves take a very different approach. They launch this huge PR campaign.
Yeah, unprecedented, really, for a missing person case at that time. It was a very conscious decision. Jerry McCann is quoted saying they realized they needed to market Madeleine, keep her face, her story, in the public eye constantly.
How did they do that?
They hired professional PR firms. They got help from government press officers, like Clarence Mitchell, who became their long-term spokesman. They used high-profile connections. Sir Philip Green lent them his private jet.
To fly to Rome.
Exactly, to meet Pope Benedict XVI. Generated massive global headlines, kept the story front and center.
And the public response was huge, wasn't it? Madeleine's fund.
Set up just 12 days after she disappeared. It received over £1.8 million in donations in the first 10 months alone. That level of public support and funding was extraordinary. It definitely kept pressure on the authorities worldwide.
That same intense media focus, it had a downside, especially with the Portuguese police.
It did. It seems counterintuitive, but yes.
Yeah.
A PG officer later said that the sheer scale and professionalism of the McCann's PR campaign actually made them suspicious early on.
Suspicious. Well,
They apparently saw it as unnatural. Like the focus was too much on media management and not enough on quietly helping the police find their daughter. It fed into this narrative that maybe the parents knew more than they were letting on. A terrible double bind for the McCanns.
so that suspicion, initially it didn't land on the McCanns, did it? The first official suspect, the first arguido, was Robert Murat.
That's right. Robert Murat, a British-Portuguese guy, a property consultant, lived very close by, maybe 150 yards from apartment 5A. He was formally named an arguido.
Which means what exactly in the Portuguese system?
It's a formal suspect status. Doesn't mean charged, but means you're under official investigation. You have certain rights, like legal representation during questioning, but you are definitely a focus.
And why Murat? What drew attention to him?
It was actually quite thin, initially. A journalist reported that Murat had been hanging around the investigation area, asking maybe too many questions, seemed overly interested. That was enough to trigger the arguido status.
So they investigated him.
Oh, yes. Searched his house, drained swimming pools nearby, questioned him and some associates extensively. But ultimately, after months, they found absolutely nothing concrete linking him to Madeleine's disappearance.
So his status was lifted.
Yes, in July 2008, his arguido status was formally lifted due to lack of evidence. and he later sued several British newspapers for libel over stories connecting him to the crime.
And won substantial damages, I recall.
He did. Record damages at the time, around £600,000. Shows how damaging that initial, perhaps premature suspicion was.
With Murat cleared, the focus of the Portuguese investigation then shifted dramatically, didn't it? Right onto the parents.
It did. That early unease about the PR campaign, combined with what the PJ perceived as inconsistencies in the McCann's accounts. Media leaks amplified these perceived issues.
What sort of inconsistency?
Things like, did they check using the front door or the back patio door? Seemingly minor details became magnified. And then there was the question, often asked in cases where parents are suspected. Why did Kate run back screaming instead of immediately using her mobile phone to call the police from the apartment?
Which might seem logical in hindsight, but in a moment of pure panic.
Exactly. Panic isn't logical. But investigators looked for patterns, and these points raised flags for the PJ, rightly or wrongly.
So by August 2007, what was the main theory the Portuguese police were working on?
It became known as the accident cover-up theory. The core belief within the PJ was that Madeleine hadn't been abducted, but had died accidentally inside apartment 5A.
How? An accident?
The speculation, never proven, centered around the possibility that the parents might have given the children sedatives to help them sleep while they were at dinner, and perhaps Madeleine had a fatal reaction, an overdose.
And the cover-up part?
The theory was that the parents, realizing what had happened, panicked and decided to conceal the death, staging an abduction to cover their tracks.
Okay, but if she died in the apartment, where did the body go? This leads to the car, doesn't it?
Yes. Crucially, the theory proposed that the parents somehow hid Madeleine's body for about a month. Then, after hiring a new rental car, a silver Renault Scenic, they used that car to transport and dispose of the body somewhere else.
A month. Hiding a body for a month in a holiday complex seems incredibly difficult.
Extremely difficult, bordering on unbelievable for many. But that was the working theory. And it led directly to probably the most controversial element of the entire first investigation: the sniffer dogs and the DNA evidence found in that rental car.
Right, let's unpack this carefully. The sniffer dogs. 2 dogs were brought over from the UK.
Yes, highly specialized dogs from South Yorkshire Police. Keela, a blood detection dog trained to find tiny traces of blood, and Eddie, a cadaver dog trained to detect the unique scent of human decomposition.
And what did they find? Or rather, what did they alert to?
Both dogs alerted inside apartment 5A, specifically in the living room area behind the sofa. Eddie, the cadaver dog, also gave alerts near the wardrobe in the parents' bedroom.
Okay, alerts inside the apartment where she disappeared. But the crucial alerts were related to the car.
Yes. Eddie, the cadaver dog, strongly alerted to the boot area, the trunk, of that Renault Scenic rented by the McCanns.
And here's the timing issue again. That car was rented 24 days after Madeleine disappeared.
Exactly. So for the dog alert to be meaningful in the context of Madeleine's death, the PJ theory had to involve the parents storing the body for weeks and then moving it in that specific car.
Okay, so the dog alerts pointed towards the possibility. What about forensic evidence? eDNA.
This is where it gets incredibly complex and contentious. Samples collected from the areas where the dogs alerted, including the car boot, were sent to the UK's Forensic Science Service, FSS, in Birmingham for DNA analysis.
And the FSS used a specific controversial technique.
They did. Low copy number, or LCN, DNA testing. It's designed for situations where you only have a tiny amount of DNA, maybe just a few cells.
Sounds useful.
It can be, but it's highly problematic. LCN works by massively amplifying the tiny DNA sample you have. The big risk is contamination. Stray DNA from investigators, from the lab, from anywhere, can easily get amplified along with the target DNA, leading to mixed, complex, and potentially meaningless results.
So it's not considered reliable for courtroom evidence in many places.
Exactly. Many jurisdictions don't allow LCN results as primary evidence because the risk of misinterpretation is just too high. You can't be sure if the DNA profile you're seeing is genuinely from the source or just background noise.
So what did the FSS actually find in the sample from the boot of the Renault Scenic using this LCN technique?
This is the absolute crux of it. The FSS reported back to the Portuguese police via email. They stated that one sample from the car boot contained 15 out of Madeleine's 19 DNA components or markers.
15 out of 19. That sounds significant.
It does on the surface, but the FSS immediately attached a massive critical warning. They said the result was, quote, too complex for meaningful interpretation and inclusion.
Why too complex?
Because the sample clearly contained DNA from at least 3 different people. It was a messy mixture. The FSS explicitly stated they could not determine if the Madeleine components were a genuine match or simply the result of random chance due to the complexity and potential contamination inherent in LCN testing. He basically said, we can't be sure this means anything.
Inconclusive, essentially.
Highly inconclusive. But that's not how it played out publicly.
No. The Portuguese press got hold of the initial finding, the 15 components, and ran with it.
Ran wild with it. Leaks suggested it was a 100% match. Headlines screamed, "Corpse in McCann car." The crucial context, the FSS's own warnings about the unreliability and complexity, was completely lost in the media storm.
And that media storm solidified the police focus.
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
Based largely on the misinterpretation of this DNA evidence and the dog alerts, the PJ moved forward with the accident cover-up theory.
Which led to the McCanns themselves being made arguidos.
Yes, on September 7th, 2007, both Kate and Jerry were formally declared suspects. Kate underwent an 11-hour interview. On legal advice, she refused to answer 48 specific questions put to her.
Which the PJ likely saw as
An admission of guilt, or at least hiding something. It reinforced their suspicions. The McCanns flew back to the UK just 2 days later under this cloud of official suspicion.
And the lead investigator at the time, Gonçalo Amaral.
He was later removed from the case, partly for publicly criticizing the British police, but he didn't go quietly. He published a book, Maddie, Verdade da Mentira, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie.
Pushing the accident cover-up theory very strongly.
Very aggressively. The book became a bestseller in Portugal, but also led to years of protracted, bitter libel battles with the McCanns across international courts.
So the first Portuguese inquiry essentially ended with suspicion pointed at the parents, but no charges.
Correct. The case was officially shelved in 2008, but that narrative, the accident, the cover-up, fueled by the dog alerts and the misinterpreted DNA, it lingered for years in the public consciousness.
Until when? Was there ever an official retraction or clarification?
It took a long time. It wasn't really until 2017, nearly a decade later, that senior figures from both the UK's Metropolitan Police and the Portuguese PJ publicly stated, collaboratively, that there was no fact at this point or evidence that suggests the parents were involved in Madeleine McCann's disappearance.
Yeah.
A major, albeit very delayed, shift.
Okay, so the Portuguese investigation stalls. The parents return to the UK under suspicion, but they keep campaigning. This leaves us to 2011 and the launch of Operation Grange.
Yes. After years of lobbying by the McCanns, their supporters, and a high-profile campaign by newspapers like The Sun, the UK government stepped in. The Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May, and Prime Minister David Cameron ordered Scotland Yard to conduct a full review of the case.
This wasn't just a review, though. It became a full-scale investigation, right? Operation Grange.
It did. Started as a review, but quickly morphed into a massive, active investigation. It launched with 29 dedicated detectives, and the cost.
It's been substantial. How much are we talking?
By March 2024, the total reported cost of Operation Grange had reached $13.2 million, a huge commitment of public funds over more than a decade.
And the fundamental approach of Operation Grange was different from the start.
Completely different. The detective chief inspector leading it, Andy Redwood, made it clear immediately. They were discarding the accident cover-up theory.
Their starting premise was
stranger abduction. Redwood stated they were treating it as a criminal act by a stranger, likely either a planned abduction or, perhaps more probable in their view, a burglary that went wrong.
a burglary gone wrong. What was the evidence for that?
They highlighted a significant spike in local burglaries in Praia da Luz just before Madeleine disappeared, a four-fold increase apparently, including 2 burglaries reported in the McCann's specific apartment block in the 17 days leading up to May 3rd.
So a pattern of opportunistic crime in the area.
Exactly. Intruders were known to target ground floor apartments, often getting in through unlocked windows or patio doors, just like the scenario at 5A. This made the burglary gone wrong theory seem quite plausible. Maybe someone broke in expecting an empty apartment and was confronted by Madeleine.
Did Operation Grange find any evidence suggesting apartment 5A was specifically targeted or watched beforehand?
They did look into that. Their review uncovered several witness accounts, some old, some new, reporting seeing suspicious men apparently observing apartment 5A in the days before May 3rd.
Any specific descriptions?
One recurring description mentioned an ugly blonde-haired man seen loitering nearby. These accounts supported the idea that maybe it wasn't entirely random, that the apartment or the area was being scoped out by potential criminals.
So, if Grange is focused on stranger abduction around 10 p.m., the Smith sighting becomes paramount.
Absolutely central. The man seen by Martin and Mary Smith at 10 p.m. carrying a child in pajamas. Operation Grange deemed this the most credible sighting.
And they released EFITs of this man.
Yes. In October 2013, big public appeal via the BBC's Crime Watch program. They released these computer-generated images, EFITs, based on the Smiths' descriptions.
But there's a backstory to those EFITs, isn't there? They weren't actually new in 2013.
No, and this is another fascinating, slightly troubling detail about how the investigation was influenced by external factors. Those EFITs had actually been created way back in 2008.
5 years earlier. By whom?
By the McCann's own team of private investigators, a company called Oakley International. They had commissioned the EFITs based on the Smith sighting back then.
So why weren't they released in 2008, if that was potentially the best lead?
This is where it gets complicated. Apparently, when Martin Smith, one of the key witnesses, first saw the completed EFIT, he momentarily thought it resembled Jerry McCann.
He thought it looked like Madeleine's father.
Just for a moment, he quickly realized his mistake and retracted it. And crucially, Jerry had a solid alibi. He was dining with friends at the exact time of the Smith sighting. But the damage was done in the minds of the investigators and the McCann team.
They feared releasing it would fuel the flame.
Precisely. They were already battling intense media speculation and conspiracy theories about their involvement. They feared that releasing an EFIT that even one key witness momentarily mistook for Jerry would just pour gasoline on that fire, regardless of the alibi.
So a potentially crucial piece of evidence was withheld for 5 years due to fear of bad PR.
It appears so. A strategic decision made under immense pressure, but one that potentially delayed a key line of inquiry for half a decade. Only when Operation Grange took over, with a clear focus on stranger abduction, were those EFITs finally made public.
Beyond revisiting sightings, Operation Grange also used modern techniques, particularly analyzing mobile phone data.
Yes, this was a major part of their work. Systematically analyzing cell tower data, call records, phone movements in the vicinity of the Ocean Club around the time Madeleine disappeared. Standard procedure now, but perhaps not applied so rigorously back in 2007.
And did this yield results?
It did. It generated new leads and persons of interest. For example, they interviewed 3 men associated with a former bus driver who worked at the Ocean Club, though these men denied any involvement.
But there was a more significant hit from the phone data.
Yes, it highlighted the movements of a man named Euclides Montero.
Who was he?
He's a former employee at the Ocean Club, had worked in the restaurant. He actually been fired sometime earlier for theft. And importantly, he had died in a tractor accident back in 2009.
So he couldn't be interviewed. Why was his phone activity significant?
His mobile phone records showed activity near the Ocean Club Resort on the night of May 3rd, placed him right in the vicinity. Investigators started looking at him in connection with that spike in local burglaries.
And was there anything else in his background?
Yes. Worryingly, Montero had also been investigated, though not convicted, in connection with some unrelated sexual assaults on young girls in the Algarve area between 2004 and 2006. So a history of theft, possible link to sexual offenses, and phone placing him near the scene. He became a significant person of interest, posthumously.
But the phone data analysis ultimately led to an even bigger breakthrough, didn't it? The one that dominates the case today. Christian Bruckner.
Yes, or CB, as he's often referred to in reports. In June 2020, German prosecutors, the BKA, made a really startling announcement. They said they had concrete evidence that Christian Bruckner had abducted and killed Madeleine McCann.
So they weren't treating it as a missing person case anymore?
No. The German authorities explicitly stated they were treating it as a murder investigation, with Madeleine presumed dead, and Bruckner as the prime, indeed only current, suspect.
Who is Christian Bruckner? What's his background?
He's a German national, a drifter with a long criminal record, including convictions for child sexual abuse and drug offenses. Crucially, at the time Madeleine disappeared in 2007, he was living in the Algarve region.
Near Praia da Luz.
Yes, living a transient life, often staying in a distinctive VW camper van near Praia da Luz. And importantly, when the Germans made their announcement in 2020, Bruckner was already in prison in Germany.
For what?
For the brutal rape of a 72-year-old American woman in her home in Praia da Luz back in 2005. So he was a known violent sexual predator operating in the exact area at the relevant time.
Okay, so proximity and prior convictions. But what was the concrete evidence the Germans mentioned? What specifically links him to Madeleine's disappearance on that night?
The key piece seems to be phone data again. Investigators found that a specific mobile phone number, known to be used by Bruckner, received a phone call that pinged off a cell tower very close to the Ocean Club Resort on the evening of May 3rd.
How close in time?
The call apparently lasted about 30 minutes, ending shortly before Madeleine was discovered missing. It places him squarely in the immediate vicinity during that critical window between the last check and Kate's discovery.
Anything else beyond the phone data? Witness testimony?
Yes, some potentially crucial testimony emerged. A former girlfriend of Bruckner's came forward. She alleged that on the night before Madeleine disappeared, Bruckner told her something chilling.
What did she claim he said?
According to her statement, he said, "I have a job to do in Praia de Luz tomorrow. It's a horrible job, but it's something I have to do, and it will change my life."
Wow. If true, that sounds like premeditation.
It strongly suggests it. Combined with the phone location data, it paints a very damning picture. And there's one more piece related to his movements.
What's that?
His car at the time, a Jaguar XJR6. Records show that car was re-registered to a new owner on May 4th, 2007, the day after Madeleine disappeared.
Suggesting he got rid of it very quickly.
Exactly. Potentially disposing of a vehicle that might contain forensic evidence or link him to the scene.
So the Germans declare it a murder investigation, prime suspect identified. What actions have they taken since 2020? Have there been searches?
Yes, several significant searches based on Bruckner's known haunts and movements. In 2020, German police searched an allotment garden area in Hanover that he used to frequent.
Did they find anything?
Reports suggest they excavated a cellar structure, but didn't announce any major findings related to Madeleine. Then, in May 2023, came a much larger, internationally coordinated search.
Where was that?
At the Array Dam Reservoir. It's about 31 miles, maybe 50 kilometers, inland from Praia de Luz. Portuguese, German, and British police were all involved.
Why that specific reservoir?
Again, phone data. Cell tower information apparently placed Bruckner's phone very close to that reservoir shortly after Madeleine disappeared. The theory, or at least one possibility investigators were exploring, was that he might have driven there and disposed of her body in the water.
A grim possibility. What about more recently?
The searches have continued. In June 2025, just this past summer, police conducted another extensive search, this time focusing on scrubland and some abandoned buildings located between Praia de Luz and an old cottage Bruckner used to live in.
Using ground-penetrating radar, I read?
Yes. Heavy machinery, radar, sniffer dogs. A major effort. They found some animal bones, but initial reports said nothing definitively linked to Madeleine was recovered. The search is clearly relentless, targeting any location associated with Bruckner.
Despite all this, the German prosecutor's confidence, the phone evidence, the witness statement, the search as Bruckner still hasn't been formally charged with Madeleine's murder or abduction. Why not?
It seems to be a combination of legal complexities and maybe the high burden of proof required, especially for a murder charge without a body. There have been reports of jurisdictional confusion.
Between which countries?
Germany, where Bruckner is a citizen and was imprisoned, Portugal, where the crime occurred, and the UK, running Operation Grange. Sorting out who has the primary legal authority to bring charges against a German national for a crime in Portugal, based partly on evidence gathered by the British, is apparently quite complex.
And the standard of proof in Germany?
German law sets a very high bar for bringing a murder charge, or particularly a presumed murder. Prosecutors likely want an absolutely watertight case before proceeding, perhaps hoping ongoing searches will yield definitive forensic evidence or even Madeleine's remains.
Let's get right up to date. What's Bruckner's current legal status? He was released from prison recently.
Yes, that's a major recent development. In October 2024, he was actually acquitted of 5 unrelated sexual offense charges he was facing in Portugal. Then, in September 2025, he finished serving his full sentence for that 2005 rape conviction.
So he's out.
He's out of prison. But he's not exactly free. He was immediately placed under strict conditions. Ordered to wear an electronic ankle tag, surrender his passport, report regularly to authorities. He's under intense surveillance.
Did the British police try to speak to him upon release?
Yes. The Metropolitan Police formally requested an interview with him regarding Madeleine's case. He declined. Which is his legal right, of course, but it obviously doesn't help the investigation. Reports suggest the intense media attention following his release has made his life very difficult, constantly moving. #tag final thoughts and remaining questions. Looking back at this whole saga, you can't separate the Madeleine McCann case from the media phenomenon it became. That trial by media aspect is just fundamental to understanding how things unfolded.
Absolutely. It impacted everything, didn't it? From the initial police suspicions to how evidence was handled, and certainly the personal toll on the McCanns.
Massively. We talked about how their own PR campaign initially raised suspicion, but then the media scrutiny turned incredibly hostile, particularly towards Kate McCann.
Right. There was so much commentary about her public demeanor, her appearance. She was often described as cold or too controlled in interviews.
Yeah, and there's a grim backstory to that, according to the sources. Apparently, Kate had been specifically advised by abduction specialists not to show excessive emotion or cry on camera.
Why on earth not?
The thinking, however awful, was that the abductor might be watching and could potentially derive some kind of perverse satisfaction or pleasure from seeing the parents' intense distress. So she was trying to follow professional advice to protect her daughter, in a way.
But the public perception was the opposite.
Completely. It fueled the narrative that she wasn't behaving like a normal grieving mother should. People drew parallels with cases like Lindy Chamberlain in Australia, judged guilty by public opinion, partly because her emotional response didn't meet expectations. It's a terrible burden.
And this media scrutiny, it wasn't just newspapers and TV anymore, was it? By this time, social media was a huge factor.
Oh, huge. The rise of platforms like Twitter coincided with the peak years of interest in the case, and it became a breeding ground for the most vitriolic attacks, conspiracy theories, and outright abuse directed at the McCanns.
Did this online activity have real-world impacts?
Devastatingly so, in at least one documented instance. The case files reportedly mention the suicide of a woman who had been relentlessly posting anti-McCann content online. She took her own life after being publicly confronted by a news outlet about her online activities. It just underscores the sheer toxicity that surrounded this case online.
A truly awful side effect of the intense global focus. So if we try to distill this for the listener, nearly 2 decades on, millions spent, investigations spanning multiple countries, what are the key takeaways?
I think you have to understand the two main competing narratives that have driven this. First, there was that early Portuguese theory, the tragic accident in the apartment, followed by a panicked cover-up by the parents. That theory relied heavily on those sniffer dog alerts and, crucially, the LCN DNA evidence from the car.
Evidence we now know was fundamentally flawed and inconclusive.
Exactly. The science just wasn't there to support the conclusions being drawn at the time. The second narrative, which is the one pursued relentlessly by Operation Grange and now the German prosecutors, is the stranger abduction theory.
Focusing initially on a burglary gone wrong, maybe, but now almost entirely centered on one individual.
Right. Christian Bruckner. Based on his history, his presence in the area, that critical phone data placing him near the scene, the witness statement about his alleged intentions, and his suspicious car disposal.
And despite the early suspicion, it's important to reiterate the current consensus among investigators.
Yes. High-level police officials in both the UK and Portugal have publicly stated they do not believe the McCanns were involved in Madeleine's disappearance. The focus is elsewhere.
Which leads us, I suppose, to the final lingering question, the provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Given everything we know now, the unprecedented resources poured into this, the years of work by multiple police forces, the international cooperation, the identification of a very strong prime suspect in Christian Bruckner with concrete evidence like phone tracking, why are formal charges for Madeleine's disappearance still proving so difficult to bring?
What does that tell us about the burden of proof needed, especially in a presumed murder case without a body? And perhaps, what does the continued funding, the UK Home Office setting aside another £100,000 plus for Operation Grange for the next financial year, what does that signal?
Does it signal continued confidence that a breakthrough is still possible? That definitive proof, maybe forensic, maybe testimonial, is still out there to be found, even with the main suspect now out of prison, albeit monitored.
The search for answers clearly is far from over, an incredibly complex, tragic story that continues to unfold. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.